Ladies and gentlemen, ATDF everything in that shelf presentation. You're now rocking with TDF everything. Spoiled rotten.
Spoiler alert.
Welcome back, everybody.
Hey.
It's me, Daniel,
And this is Ben
on Spoiled Rotten.
on that shelf.
Boom.
Yes.
Loki, episode 4, the Nexus event.
The Nexus event.
Yeah. Well,
there's so much to talk about here, and this is going to be great. This is going to be a good episode, I can tell.
Basically it starts off, Renslayer takes Sylvie from her timeline as a kid. I genuinely thought they were just taking all Lokis, but then I realized, no, this is definitely a flashback. Just because the last time we saw her, I feel like she was kind of like gearing up to go. But this was definitely a flashback, and I feel like, like they just took her while she was playing as a kid. I will come back to this. Yeah. So that's the first thing, and I kind of feel like, these episodes have been starting kind of just like in the middle of something, and you have to be like, wait, what's going on? And I'm enjoying the kind of that disorienting feeling at first for these.
Yeah, those very, very effective cold use of like a cold start, and just like, it's riveting. It's great.
But obviously Sylvie escapes. I don't know if that was obvious. I guess I didn't think of it as she escaped as a kid, but obviously she did. And
I definitely didn't think she escaped as a kid, to be honest. I thought she escaped as an adult and like hatched this out while she was like held at the TVA.
So it was definitely more than 10 years in the making. This is because they like Thor is like 1500 years old or something like that. So Loki can't be close behind that. So who knows how old Sylvie actually is. So this is quite some time in the making of Sylvie getting her revenge. But I do think it's important that she's still going with Renslayer until someone else comes into the TVA and is clearly in distress. And she asks Renslayer to help that person. And then they just watch that person get pruned. And I think that's when she's like, oh, well, fuck this. I am not going to be a part of this. And that's... I think she doesn't escape there, but she makes her decision of like, oh, these are the bad guys. I am definitely with the bad guys.
It's a very quick assessment, and it's just,
and I don't know if
such
that's
a good call,
intended, but I do think that it's important that they show, for a reason I'll bring up later, but for this very immediate reason of like, oh, I broke the rules. Interesting. And then to be like, oh no, they're just the bad guys. Like I think it's kind of this thing of like, maybe she would have gone along with it and been like, I guess I broke the rule, because you see her go through everything, right? Like she isn't fully like, what the hell? How is this? She's just a scared kid. So I guess any authority figure being like, you broke the rules, she'd be like, but I think it's important to her to see like, oh, but they don't care about people. They are heartless. They're the bad guys.
Yeah, I like thinking about like Loki going through that, but all of a sudden now having the jarring, even like visual imagery of like a young girl going through this whole process too, and how scary that must have been. And just like, do or die, and she chose a different, like both Lokis chose a do or die, but hers was a very different choice. The Loki that we're used to is obviously more thought out, or plays out in a different way.
But what I did like about this was that it shows that obviously Sylvie and Renslayer are important to each other. Like this is very personal for me. I feel like it's personal for both of them. Like obviously Renslayer is the person that removes Sylvie from her life, but also you could see it as a positive or a negative. But like that was, I'm assuming, Renslayer's first embarrassment, that like she's in front of the judge and then Sylvie gets away from her. And then the next, we know she becomes a judge. So obviously that is a significant moment in her life that they're both part of that significant point in their life. They both make decisions in that moment.
Yeah. And there's like something really significant about this pivotal scene, which it'll come back later on in the episode for sure. But like I definitely want to get there when we do. But this I love this moment because it is such an origin stories for both of them, and like where
like they both chose to survive in that moment. Like
yes,
and you see that like Sylvie more so of like what she had to do to survive, but obviously Renslayer survived if she becomes a judge later. So yeah, I just thought that was interesting that they make it clear in that moment of like, oh, these two mean something to each other.
Yep.
That wasn't just a random encounter. But basically then we see Renslayer present, or what as best as present day can be in a show like this.
Correct.
And she's meeting with the timekeepers, and then she comes out of there. I'll get into the timekeepers later, but she meets with them. She comes out, and Mobius kind of intercepts her, and he's talking to her about like what's going on, but she basically lets him know like, oh no, C20 is dead. I mean, she is dead, but that she died from her encounter with Sylvie, that it broke her mind. And what I liked here is obviously this episode I was really looking into like love and control for this, and I think Renslayer obviously is playing off the love Mobius has for her, and I don't know if it's a romantic love, but again, there's a scene later where they talk about their special relationship, and I think she preys on that in this moment where she's like, we can keep this between the two of us, right? Like, and knowing that she's lying, but also throwing in that whole like, but the two of us, like, we've got something special here, and I know I can trust you with this delicate information, kind of buys her some good grace from Mobius that he will lie for her. To be like, yeah, like, okay, cool. So she's like, she's dead, don't tell anybody. And then she lies about the why she is killed.
Yeah. I do like how Mobius in the scene does push back in the sense of just questioning her, of being like, but she was fine when I last saw her and all this kind of stuff. Shooken up, but fine, even. But like he
that all
does
stops
push back a little bit here.
Once she's like, hey, keep this between us though.
Exactly.
When he stops, he's like, oh, and like I'm not saying he visibly was like that, but I think that is the point, is that she has the control in this situation because she knows what being next to her would mean for him. Like, like we kind of talked about it last episode, the whole like, oh, I'm not your only analyst, like feeling like he's not that special, and then bringing him right back on board of like, ooh, this is a secret we have together.
It's a power play in terms of social circles and like dynamics and all that kind of stuff, and it's really, really fun to watch her do it in this exact situation, because you're like, at this, you're definitely like raising an eyebrow of everything associated with TVA. And at this point, you're like, how into it is she? And this is just one of those things like, oh, you're full on like seeing her using that power and that dynamic to just manipulate people around her and all that kind of stuff. And it's just wildly, it's an episode that just, I really love Renslayer in this episode for sure.
But so then we're back on Lamentis, and Sylvie opens up to Loki about like, I remember Asgard, I remember all my people or whatever. But she says something important, which is the universe needs chaos. The universe wants to break free of its wants to break free, so it manifests chaos. And she gives the example of she was born a goddess instead of a god of mischief. That's just one example. So I thought that was interesting that, like, again, we are trying to, this show is struggling with like, free will as well. And obviously it does seem that like Sylvie is an example of that. But yeah, basically then she goes like, just that alone made the TVA come for her and erase her timeline. And this is what I meant by I was going to come back to it. It does seem that like when they capture her, she's the story she's playing out with her toys is like working with the Valkyrie and like being a good guy. It doesn't look like she's on the path to be like, even when we see Loki in the first Thor movie, he's still kind of like, as a kid, kind of just like, yeah, and then I'll take power or whatever. And like, he isn't as good natured as Sylvie is in this scene as a kid.
Like there's like the Draco Malfoy kind of like, oh, you're kind of being a slimy little dickhead about this kind of thing.
And like, I hate this type of stuff, but it does seem important that like the wolf she has is a white wolf as opposed to the black wolf Hela has. And I know that visually white is good, black is bad.
Mm.
It just seemed like they were setting her up to be this good-natured, well-meaning character,
Yeah,
not
she
destined
was.
to be a loser who is evil.
Yeah, based on the one scene that we see of her, it's like
Well, I mean that in
yeah,
addition to saying,
yeah,
"Hey, help that person out that's being killed," like,
correct.
yeah,
Yes, yeah. So you're right. Those two pieces, her very nature is good. In our version of it, in those two examples, she's even playing out a scene of defense. With
Mhm.
the Valkyrie and all that kind of stuff, and I do love that, because you're just like, is this what the Nexus event was
Right. I mean,
that she was on a good path as opposed to what she was supposed to be, which is mischievous, as according
mhm.
to what the TVA defined mischievous as. Like,
Or what they
is
define a
the
Loki as.
correct, yeah. Like, and this that playing into also that element of free will and policing that choice element of things, right? Uh, Purely fantastic, and it really is really really fun to see that good natured origin. How when
Right,
Loki
like she
says
was
like,
happy, it
"Mhm,
seems, and
yep,
not just happy, but like, yeah, I keep using the term. Like, it seemed like she was benevolent in that sense.
yes, mhm," not not someone that was gonna wreak havoc in the
It
sense.
didn't feel like a power fantasy that she was
Right.
playing out. It felt like she was just having a nice story about good winning the day.
And to be fair, that is just like stories of Norse mythology that they're
Mhm. Yeah,
playing out, which is like, okay, cool, culturally makes sense.
yeah.
I'm on board with it. Mhm,
So I think, and the show doesn't, I don't think, say anything one way or the other. I just felt that like
mhm.
it seems like that's why she was picked, is that
Yeah.
she's deviating from what the TVA sees as what a Loki should be
Hmm.
by not being demonstrably evil. um Even as she plays. But yeah, so then we cut back to B15 and she's talking to Mobius and she's like, "Hey,
Hmm.
anything on C20?" Which is where you basically confirm what I was thinking, which is uh Mobius's willingness to lie, because she says,
Hmm.
"Ed, have you heard any updates on C20?" Which he has,
Hmm.
and he goes, "No, nothing yet." He didn't even say like, "That's top secret," or like, he was just like, "No, I haven't heard anything." So
Hmm.
I feel like that is kind of like Renslayer's effect on him of like, yeah, he can feel like, again, I'm using the word love and I don't mean like he wants to marry her, just
Right.
that he feels close to her. He feels,
It's a
even if it's just a
warmth, and
friendship,
yeah.
it is that
Mhm.
type of love.
Mhm. It's a comforting kind of warmth
Mhm.
dynamic of like a partnership that's been working together for as long as they have. It makes a lot of sense.
Mhm. Uh, then we do cut back to Sylvia and Loki. I should have put those together,
Mhm.
but I like that she says, "Do you think what makes a Loki the fact that we're destined to lose?" And he
Mhm.
says, "No, it's that we don't die and then we
Yep.
survive," which is important. And
Yes.
this is kind of where the show very very much leans into love, and this might just be self-love. I don't know what they're playing here in terms of the fact that I don't really quite understand the relationship of variance. Like, I
Mhm.
don't know if you're supposed to consider it these are just separate people, or it
Right.
is like they are a part of the same thing. So it could be that this is the self-love that Loki
Mhm.
shows himself by saying, "You're wonderful, like, you're amazing, you ran rings around these people, like, you survived, you're
Mhm.
truly an amazing person." And it's also acceptable if they're just like, "Oh, the fact that he can see outside of himself and give it up for someone who actually has accomplished something well
Mhm.
done," instead of taking it personally and being like, "Well, I want that. I want to be," like, just that he was able to be in that moment supportive of someone. And again, I get it. I get that it's tricky because he's also seeing that as a part of, he might see that as a part of himself.
Mhm.
The point is, the show certainly was like, you don't even like yourself. So this Nexus event, I feel like, is created because two people who had, as we saw in the episode before, never really felt a connection to anyone have made this connection.
Mhm. It's interesting that you say self-love and all this kind of stuff, because it's like Loki's experience with Sylvie is that journey through self-love where you kind of have to go through that grudging hard work of everything, which
Mhm.
was the episode before, go through those ups and downs, and like that manic and state, and also like that really really big letdown of like, oh, we really failed, and always have, and then hope. Like it really does explore that journey of self-love, or whatever kind of love that they're trying to portray. And I think the interesting thing is, we will have to come back to this at the end of the episode, but like what kind of love they're trying to portray between Loki and Sylvie is a very interesting question, because like, you know how last episode we talked, or you and I talked about, like, I think this series is about like finding love, or defining love, or defining like just figuring out what that kind of stuff looks like or means. But you know, that the end of the episode and the Sylvie love with Loki part, whether it be whatever, has to be discussed later on, and it's going to be a very very interesting discussion, I imagine.
So basically that, as you said, creates the Nexus event that gives Mobius an end. He's like, oh, there they are.
Yep. Love creates a Nexus event between two Lokis.
So then they go get them and they separate them. Basically, next time we see them on screen, they're being separated. And I do like that Loki is kind of just like, this is unfair. Like, why don't I get it? Like, like you gave her so many other people to like keep an eye on her. And he does have the childish back and forth with Mobius about like, no, you betrayed me. No, you betrayed me. Get over it. No, you get over it.
Yeah.
And then I think an important thing is what ends that playfulness is Mobius being like, yeah, I realize you're not the god of mischief. And he's like, oh, okay, what are you gonna say now? I'm the god of losing. He's like, no, you're just kind of an asshole and a bad friend. And that you can see on Loki's face, like that hurts him. Like,
yeah, that bad friend comment got to him a lot.
I think especially since he did feel like he was starting to make connections with people. I think that reminder, that affects him. That means something to him. That's not just something he's going to let roll off his back. But it's also telling that even Mobius feels betrayed. Like the betrayal wasn't necessarily going through the door. He's just like, oh man, like I vouched for you because like obviously I felt we had gone through something together. You are you're just a shitty friend.
Yeah.
But yeah, I thought that was very interesting. That he was like, no, you're just an asshole and a bad friend.
Yeah.
This is where basically they're gonna throw him into that time loop. I know they have a name for it, but I don't remember it. But before he does, he's like, all right, go ahead, go say what you're gonna say. And
right.
He's like, oh, the TVA is lying to you, which I can't tell. I feel like it must mean something to Mobius, but he does a good job in that moment of making me believe, I don't believe him. Throw him in there. He's like, what an idiot. That's the best you can come up with before I do this to you.
Yeah, you could tell like the armor in his brain is starting to crack a little bit with that comment, and he's like definitely questioning everything, but like he's just like, no, he's got enough evidence to also be like, this could be another trick of yours.
Yeah.
And I really do like that assessment that he makes there. That's great.
So basically what this time loop is Loki having to relive the moment that Lady Sif got angry at him for cutting her hair over, and it's just over and over again. I was really happy to see her again. I wish she was in more movies, but I know she does the rounds on the TV shows like Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. So if she was going to show up again, I guess it makes sense that it would be in the Loki show.
Yeah.
But the big thing about this is what outside of the comical getting punched all the time, the only thing that actually hurts is the refrain of you're always going to be alone, because I would imagine that's more what he thinks, is that he's always going to be alone, which is why it was important that he made that connection with Sylvie. And that is me coming back to the Sylvie and Loki love. I think it's more just a connection was made. I don't know if it needs to be romantic. I think it's more just the fact that he is able to see someone else is what is the difference is, because as we can see through this playing out, and it's the last time she does it, she doesn't even hit him. She just says, you are alone and you always will be alone. It's not even like a prophecy anymore. It's like, hey, just to make sure, I don't even need to punch you to hurt you right now. You are alone and you will always be alone.
Yeah. That scene was like, on top of the sound effects and the hits visually and like everything getting louder and harder and all that kind of stuff, that definitive statement was the thing that just broke him. And I don't know what would have happened again if they had to loop again over what would have happened. But like,
we already know it did happen because we didn't watch it, but I think we saw what happened. He was on the ground before it.
I get that.
Came out.
Yeah, I get that. But like, it's just like, even after that scene, like if the time cell thing wasn't stopped in that one thing, it'd be like, holy crap! It keeps going over and over and over again. Like it's almost like the infant falling thing. That the torture that Loki receives, like prolonged, is kind of, it's an interesting theme that he's got.
I don't know about that. I think what the fall thing is different to me. I think that what this is it is inside of him, obviously, because it's a memory, but it is externally someone saying something that he's thought inside.
Correct.
So I don't. Yes, I get what you mean. He suffers a lot. What I mean is, this is different from the fall. This is pointedly different. It is something else, because all those other things are like, it's what I've said I liked about this show. It's, yeah, sure, he can't beat the Hulk. The Hulk will always beat him up, or Doctor Strange can magic him, like magic circles around him or whatever. But this is all him having to confront the stuff that he already thought about himself, and now it's being externalized.
Yeah,
it's not just in his head anymore.
Yes, I 100% agree with you on that. It's way, way, way worse. What I meant was like just like the time aspect of what he has to endure. It's over and over and over. It's always prolonged, the torture. This one, it's growing too, and what it would grow to next on the next cycle and next, and it just would have been crazy to me. It's just the idea of like
and I guess what I'm saying is
torture
is
prolonging
too.
Yeah,
that's what I'm saying. Is I'm disagreeing with you that I don't think there was going to be further impact. I think we already saw what the impact was, which is he goes inside himself again. He's physically crumpled up, but also mentally. You can see him, like before Mobius comes to get him again. He's just like, I get it, please, just I'm done. Like I think that's
that.
it.
Yeah,
that
yeah.
was it.
No, he's definitely done, and that type of torture was in just so many ways worse, in the sense where it's just like there's comfort and familiarity within the setting and the scene and the face, and he's still got human touch and all those kind of aspects, but he's never gonna be able to sleep. All those other aspects of like being actually put in a prison cell, like you would be left alone, versus this is just psychological, physical, and just over repetitive, and it's purely insane.
Yeah. So then while that's happening, Mobius goes to Renslayer and he asks if he can interrogate Sylvie, which she is like, nope. Nobody gets to speak to the variant. So she just shuts it down. She doesn't try anything. Like she will later, but for this one, she's like, nope, just go back to your Loki. That's what's gonna happen. You're not bothering with that. So when he leaves there, B-15 asks him like, hey, did your Loki say anything? And I appreciated that he did say something. Then he's like, oh yeah, he just said that the TVA is lying to me. And she was like, oh, okay. And obviously she's trying to pretend like it doesn't bother her, but he's like, why? She's like, no, just doing my job. And then that they kind of just move on from there. But it was, I guess obviously that wasn't a secret that he was asked to keep. So he was like, yeah, we just said that they're lying to us, and I'm done. So B-15 plays that off.
I love the acting that B-15 does here.
B-15 is great in this episode.
Yeah, this is fantastic. Everything B-15 in this episode.
So good. But yeah, basically we already talked about it. But then it cuts back to that time loop where Loki admits, hey, I'm afraid of being alone. And she's like, yeah, and you are alone, and you always will be. So we've kind of had that conversation.
I find it interesting how that is, like the cutting of the hair thing is actually a Norse mythology thing between those two characters. I mean, it doesn't really play out in the MCU version, but it's just fun that it's like, hey, is this a nice little nod? And yes, it is, and it's kind of just fun that way. So I did like that aspect of the Norse mythology being brought into the MCU with a Loki story.
Yeah, so then he gets pulled out, and I guess Mobius is giving him a chance to talk. And he's like, nope, I'm not going to. So he's like, oh, I'll put you back in. So again, we know that is an effective use of thing. It wouldn't matter how many times. Never going to get used to it. Basically, he's not going to get used to being in that time loop. It's fucked him up. So he's like, all right, please no, I don't want to go back in there. And he lies about it. He's like, yeah, she met me on Asgard and we formed this plan. It's going great. And I'm like, come on, Loki.
Yeah.
But it does give Mobius an opportunity to be like, oh, well, she's dead. And that obviously affects him. He cannot keep that cool, even though what the words he's saying is him trying to play it off. But like visually, you realize like, oh, this isn't gonna work.
Yeah.
And I just like that. Yeah, he's just like, this just genuinely upset him. And then even as Mobius is making jokes like, oh, Sylvie, so is that with an I or an I? And he's like, like in no uncertain terms, very sternly is like, tell me if she's dead or not. I'm not fucking around. I need to know that. With Mobius, he's a good guy. He's like, no, she's alive for now. But like this, I guess that's the breaking point for Loki again. Like that concept that he's like, okay, he's not alone again. He's not going to ruin this. That he just forgoes all leverage that he has at this point and tells him the truth about the team. He's like, this is actually what you need to know. I'm sure people could see it as this is him just being like, hey, like get on my side. But I genuinely see it as like, no, because if he was playing Mobius, he would have kept that information because it was he already planted the seed. He would know that he planted the seed, and Mobius would want these answers. He could have strung him along more. I think this is him being like, no, I'm on borrowed time now. Like that, the idea that Sylvie is still alive means I need to act now. Like I need to get this done now.
I think it's one of the first times you see Loki truly recognizing his situation here and being like, no, all cards on the table. This is where I'm not playing around with Sylvie's life anymore. He'll play around with his own life, but not with Sylvie's, which is something I'm like, the love is growing even in his actions. And it's just a fantastic thing to see this development of this character with Sylvie. This Owen Wilson, the way he's playing it out too is really,
this
really
is a great
good.
Scene for him.
I love it
when he's hearing the information. Like we already know the information. They're all kidnapped. They've all had their brainwashed. They're working for the TVA. They're all variants. I just like that he's like, you can. I'm not an acting critic, but for me, when I'm watching someone act, I do appreciate watching how they react to things, like how they listen in a scene. And I feel like Owen Wilson is doing a great job of actually listening to that information, and you can see him processing it. He's not relying on his jokes or whatever. It's sturdy acting of like listening and processing. And I think it's really well done. And then obviously he still goes like, yeah, whatever, man, you're lying, and takes Loki away. And I like that basically Loki's like, you're the biggest liar. And he's like, oh, because of the Sylvie thing. Loki's like, no, that I actually respect that. It's because you lie to yourself. That's why you're the biggest liar. Which that gets him. That gets Mobius.
That gets at him.
And then so I'm gonna put all this together. This is the B-15 stuff that we were alluding to.
Yes,
I know it happens throughout the episode, but I'm just putting it all together. She goes to Sylvie and basically just demands that she show her the truth. She takes her back to the Roxxon thing, so I guess they can't find them. And is basically like you and Loki and Mobius had this conversation as well, but she was like, no, you implanted those memories, right? And she's like, no, like I can't do that. I can only use what you have. And then I just like that B-15 is completely like, well, just show me then. Like I don't need to like rely on what I grew up on, like in terms of being mind wiped. Just show me, because that felt like something. Again, some good acting of just her, because we don't see the memory. You just see B-15's reaction to the memory. And then the way she says, I looked happy is great. Like just amazing.
That broke me, man. That I was just like, holy shit. That when she did that, and then the next line immediately was, now what do we do, or something like that, or now what? I was like, I had a moment. I was like, oh shit, she's on board. this is gonna get epic now.
She's
Yeah,
definitely on
but
board.
yeah, but after that moment, that acting, damn it, so good.
That was really well done.
Yeah.
Then we see Mobius and Renslayer. They're closing the case,
Mm.
but Mobius is kind of really stuck on the Sylvie thing, which rightfully so. He's kind of just like, no, like, why wouldn't you let me interrogate her? And so then Renslayer tries one tactic of being like, hey, where would you go if you could go anywhere? And I think it's telling that he goes, well, I just like being here with you, like doing the work. Like, I know he says the whole I can do it, but the point of him saying, oh, well, being here with you, that's what I like. This is it for me. Again, kind of playing into, I guess he really meant it when he says I like looking up to you, because they must have been at some point working together before she was a judge. I guess that's what that line from the beginning is that like he's proud of his friend who got to become a judge. I genuinely thought he was bullshitting, but it seems like the way this all plays out is that he does have love for her, even if it's just a friendship one. And that, yeah, for him, he doesn't need to be anywhere else as long as he gets to do the work with Renslayer. But then he still keeps going with come on though, seriously, what, like I feel like I could have done some good work by working Sylvie. And she does say the mean thing of like, well, your Loki got away the first time you tried to, but then she pivots again and then again goes for the more immediate, like, look, we're good friends, and saying, and I wrote it down so I don't want to fuck it up, but basically she says she wouldn't want him to get hurt the way C20 did.
Yep.
She like, a friendship like ours is uncommon, and they're allies against time and friends till the end. And like, that's like, obviously everything she says is that what you wanted to hear, and he's like, only if it's true. Again, I genuinely believe that that would be the best thing for him to hear if it were true.
Yeah,
but since he already kind of doesn't believe her, it's hard for him to take that. But I just I like that throughout this whole thing he's kind of just like keeps reinforcing like what is important to me is this relationship, and she knows it, but it is just like, oh man, I can't trust you though.
Yeah, I like there's a few things in this scene that I want to point out with Renslayer that I really, really love. So first, all the dialogue that she uses between her and Mobius is like, hey, I'm pulling you closer, but keeping you like at a distance too. Like everything is like, it's you and me as friends till the end. It's not like a friend zone thing, but it's just like, hey,
definitely not.
Yeah, defining the relationship and like doing this and doing all that kind of stuff. That's what Renslayer's doing with all her words, and it's sounding great to Owen Wilson in the sense where it's like, yeah, but and that's what he's hearing, right? So I really love that aspect of it. But this is the part where originally I was talking about the Renslayer Sylvie kind of thing. This is where, to me, Renslayer is, and there's more evidence of it later on through the episode too, where this is a really personal case for her. For her to put Sylvie's dagger at the front and center aspect of that mantle, like that was reserved from the beginning. You know, there's even something above that spot below. So to me, I'm like, she's playing this game. I was like, where am I going to put this? How about all this kind of stuff? I'm like, no, you know where you wanted to put that. You've been dying to put that there your whole career.
Yeah, like the way, exactly what you just said. The way Mobius is like, oh, so where are you going to put that trophy? And she's like, oh yeah, I forgot. Like, she didn't forget about that. This was a big trophy for her.
Yeah.
But also I forgot one thing before she does the whole, I didn't want to happen. What happened to C20 happened to you. She even goes, hey, the timekeepers actually want you to be there when they prune. Meaning she tried the whole like, oh yeah, let's forget about that. Now that we're done this ordeal, like, what would you do to relax? Then it's like, hey, it seems like things are looking up for you because the timekeepers want to meet you, because obviously he said he's never met them before. So it's like, hey, the timekeepers want you, and obviously that's not gonna sway him from questioning.
She's trying to distract him with
she tries like
shiny
different
prizes
things throughout the thing, until she lands on, oh yeah, I can just make this a personal thing.
Yeah.
Which I don't know why she didn't start. I mean, I guess that's on purpose that she didn't start with that, because it isn't as personal to her as it is for him.
I also like in this scene how he lies about the number of drinks and be like, oh yeah, no, I've had too many. It's like, I'm like, you didn't even finish the first one. You're lying about finishing 2. I'm like, interesting. You're playing a game here. And
I think the game was where you're going to put your trophy, knowing that's something that she would care about, so then he has time to swap out the pads. I think that was.
Oh yeah, there's multiple games being played here, but it's a fun scene to just watch all those elements unfold because it's such an important scene, and I love it.
But yeah, sorry, I one thing I thought she did well in terms of trying to trick him is, and he even says that was a good speech, is tying their friendship to this sacred timeline. She's like, we are protecting the sacred timeline because this is the bond. We know, like, this is what keeps us together. We don't want to undo that by having just a multiverse. Like, this is what we're trying to protect. Is like, we're doing it for everyone, but this is for us. And like, I was like, that is a good play. Like, and obviously they shine a light on it by having Mobius be like, this is a good speech. That it's like, listen, like, who knows what happens to us if the sacred timeline is destroyed. Manipulative, but I'm like, I mean, if you're swinging for the fence, there you go.
Yeah, it's true.
But yeah, he goes.
Yep.
Oh yeah.
Mobius scuts the data pad. He gets out of there.
He sees it that obviously C20 was very lucid and saying exactly what Loki said. That they're all variants, and that she saw memories of her life before she was in the TVA. So he goes to get Loki, and I think this is where the show makes it clear, like, the fact that you made a connection here is the point. So did you really think that you would always be alone? Because if you didn't always think that, then maybe that isn't the Nexus event. But I mean, I think it's clear. Yes, he did. He genuinely thought, oh, I'm always going to be alone, and I am alone. So the fact that he wasn't with Sylvie is the Nexus event that started this. So I think that's what Mobius needed to hear from him. Like, oh yeah, stop fucking around. Just, did you think you were going to be alone? So I thought that was very interesting. And that he's like, man, so I'm going to just have to trust 2 Lokis. And Loki's like, or just trust the word of a friend. And I like that they.
Yeah, because I like
him as a friend as well.
Yeah, because I like in that moment where I'm like, there was no bullshitting in that. I'm like, that was a genuine thing. I'm like, yeah, it's you and me together kind of deal. Like, we played each other. Now there's all honesty on the table now, and I really, really loved it, but short-lived.
Yeah, but before they meet Renslayer, I think it is important to point out that Mobius actually walks back his statement from the first episode, and he says, you know, like, you can be whatever you want. Like, it's him obviously showing that he's divesting from the dogma of the TVA. And
he's like, breaking away from it.
Doesn't matter what the timekeepers say. It doesn't matter what someone might have told you when they first met you. Like, you can be what you want to be. It's not all decided for you.
Yeah, even a good guy. Yeah. So yeah, and I like that. Yeah,
I do. Yeah, I mean, because that is, I think it's important to bring that up, just because, as we've already kind of posited, it seems like the TVA, well, I won't say timekeepers because we're about to get into that scene, but the TVA believes Loki's can only be bad. So
correct.
If Sylvie wasn't on that path, got to get rid of her. And this Loki seems like they actually are the authors of their own misery here, because Loki was always going to be, this Loki seems like he was always going to be bad, but they've intervened. And I only mean always going to be bad because he branched off, so he wasn't going to have those experiences that the Loki we saw die in Infinity War had.
Right.
So it seems like he was going to just keep being evil or die trying.
Yeah.
But since they intervened, he seems like he's on the same path as the Loki we saw in.
Yeah.
So they've got 2 good Lokis right now. But yeah, I just wanted to make sure I didn't miss that he did kind of say, like, I believe in you. And that was a very nice moment of showing his character growth, but also some connection between the 2 of them. But yeah, Renslayer's there, as you said. It's very short-lived. She very coldly tells him he's going to be pruned, and he calls back to the thing, and he's like, well, where I would go is where I'm actually from. Hopefully I had a jet. I really liked it. He's like, hopefully I have a jet ski that I can just jet ski around.
I was really hoping the jet ski was going to come up in dialogue again some point, and that was a great moment to do it. And this, such a sad scene too.
This affects Loki. Like, he does not play like it doesn't matter to him. That's it gets in an episode where a bunch of people have had very upsetting things revealed to them, and they try to play it off. It was nice to see Loki just be like, no, that's fucked. Are you kidding me? Like, so yeah, I like that. And then another nice moment, which is Sylvie and Loki are reunited before they're about to go see the Timekeepers, and right away Sylvie asks, are you okay? It's not like they don't joke around anymore. There's no like posturing. It's just like, are you okay? I really thought that was a nice touch.
I really did too.
But yeah, basically they're in the elevator, and I know that they've said it's from Mad Men, which I did think of. It was a very nice power move. It's the same setup as well in the elevator of Sylvie being like, why did you even do this to me? And just the smile on Renslayer's face, and she's like, I don't even remember. And I think it really is irrelevant whether or not she remembers. It's more that she takes joy in denying Sylvie that bit of information, even if it's because she doesn't remember. It's still important that like she's like, you have taken a notch out of me, and I have this moment where I can take it right back out of you by saying, no, I don't even remember.
Because
it doesn't matter if it's true or not. It still will hurt Sylvie in that moment to not even have an answer as to why they picked it.
Because it meant so much to her, that reason, right? And rightfully so, for her to go through all these things. And this is that final piece of evidence I was talking about a little bit before, where she was put the dagger in the middle of the mantle. Like, this is a personal thing for her to be like, have that smile and be like, yep. It's like the Thanos moment of like, I don't even know who you are. But in that situation, it was like, yeah, that made sense. Because
that's why I didn't say the Thanos thing. It's more the Mad Men moment of when he goes, I feel bad for you. The Ginsburg character goes, I feel bad for you. And John Hamm goes, I don't even think about you. Whether or not it's true, you're just cutting the legs out from under someone right in that moment. And I understand the Thanos thing, but we know as the audience, he genuinely doesn't know who she is. So it doesn't have the same weight as that Mad Men moment.
It's the same weight for Scarlet Witch's character, but not for these characters. Not the same thing at all, but like, it's still like that verbal, like, ouch. That really hurt.
What I mean, for the audience, but what I mean is for the character saying it, not the character hearing it. I Thanos genuinely is just like, I don't know who you are.
He's like, I don't know who you are. That was genuine, but this is intentional.
Don Draper and Renslayer are making a choice in that moment to deny somebody something.
Correct. And enjoy and take pleasure in doing that too. That's the part too that's like, these are bad people. Well, that's a bad thing for sure. That was rough for sure, how personal that got.
But yeah, basically then they go in.
By the way, this was the point at the episode where I thought they were going to cut. I was like, oh, they're going to cut before they open the doors, damn it. But then they did, and that was just like the episode kept going. I was thoroughly happy with that.
Nice.
Yeah.
They're in there. They have some talking. I genuinely could not understand two of the three timekeepers. I didn't put on captions. I was just like, I don't know what they're saying.
Same.
And so if some interesting stuff was said, I don't know it, because I was just like, I can't hear them. I don't understand why it's like this. It must not be important. Like, I can't imagine they would have such a muddy audio mix if this was important.
I agree.
So I just was like, it's whatever. And so then I like that it was like right before they're about to get deleted. B-15 shows up because she releases them from their collars, which is great, so they can fight. I'm assuming B-15 died. I hope not, but it seems like she did, because she doesn't really show up again. She just kind of drops to the ground.
I agree. I didn't see her again. I had that question for you. I'm like, did you see her again?
No,
Did you even
I
see a
didn't see her.
body? But yeah,
I did not see a body. That's why
Yeah.
I'm like, hopefully she's still alive. But
Mhm.
I can't imagine they'd just be like, nah, we'll just leave her. I'm sure
Yeah.
they pruned her or whatever. But yeah, so they have the fight. Not the best fight, but it's
Yeah.
emotionally cathartic. That
It's
they're
a
like,
fight.
you think like, oh, maybe we'll get some answers here. But I mean, it's obviously important that she cuts off the head of
Yeah.
I will just say the middle timekeeper, and it's like,
And
oh, they're just a
boom, boom,
mindless
boom, robot.
androids. So
Yep.
they have they still aren't closer to figuring out like who controls the TVA, which is frustrating, but you know, we still
Yeah.
have 2 more episodes, so that makes sense.
Yep.
And Loki gets pruned right before. I'm assuming he says he's gonna love you, or maybe he was gonna say I'm force sensitive. I don't know. But
Nice.
I hate
Very
Rise
nice.
of Skywalker. But yeah,
that is gonna soundbite for sure. Please tell me that's gonna soundbite.
People have to just listen to the episode to get the goods.
Get the good dig. Get the good dig.
But yeah, he's pruned, and I didn't even recognize that he was being pruned at first. I was like, oh, like his heart is exploding with love. I genuinely thought that. I was like, oh wow.
I'm like, did
something's happening? And then I'm like, oh, he's just dying.
Is he gonna say I am Groot? Start producing
he gets pruned.
fireflies. Yeah.
And what I found very interesting was once Loki's gone, Sylvie like takes back control pretty quickly on Renslayer. And I believe that she said without fear, do it. Like, I know she was a bit winded from being taken down, but the way she's just like, yeah, just do it. I was like, that's fucking cold blooded. Like, I don't know. Like at this point of watching the thing, I'm like, oh, is she like finally I have an excuse to like tap out? But based on what happens to Loki, I'm like, oh, maybe she just knows it's not really going to affect her. Like maybe she's just like, yeah, I'll be fine. Go ahead, do it.
Maybe she knows what the result of the stick is, and then she's like, and I know the exact way to get back, like the way. Well,
I think either way, she would be at peace if it like she is at peace with the prospect of being pruned. It does not bother her. She's just like, yep, do it.
In that scene, I took it as, hey, I've already taken everything away from you. This is not going to even help you whatsoever if you prune me, so go ahead, kind of deal. I that's how I read that delivery. I was like, yeah, cold-blooded, accurate.
I just took it as finally I'm done with this. Like, like, you know what? Like, less stress for me. Go ahead and do it. But yeah,
especially since like she had to do the Mobius thing too. She's like, if she genuinely had that like expectation that they were gonna run side by side to the end of the world together.
Well, I mean, she didn't.
I
think it's clear we know she didn't.
Right,
I think
but manipulating
him. Yeah,
she was definitely manipulating. But what I meant is like that hurt for her to have to do. Obviously,
it might have, but also I think that whole I have another analyst could just be another Mobius. Like I don't think she's as invested in it. I mean, I shouldn't say I don't think. I know she's not as invested, so I don't know if like. I feel like if she cared about it, there would have been a shot of her looking like she cared that she gave that order. But she gives that order like right away, prune him, and then he's just gone. And they focus on Loki being upset, not her even having a twinge of being upset. Again, now that we know what happens, now that we know what happens when you're pruned, I think it's very low stakes for her.
Right.
Like, oh, I'm just sending him somewhere else.
Right.
But yeah, I guess that's what we have to get to. The last thing is that post-credit scene where Loki wakes up in a destroyed New York to classic boastful and Kid Loki being part of the Young Avengers, meaning this episode has finally revealed their Young Avenger that they're introducing into the universe. And there's Crocodile Loki, or I never remember if it's an alligator or a crocodile, especially when they're that small. It looks like a crocodile to me.
Yeah, I can't remember the difference. Stacy says it's a croc.
Yeah,
so
it looks like a crocodile.
Yeah.
Alligators, I think, have the like very like
broad nose or something.
No,
like
that's
that. Thin.
Very narrow. Yeah, it's very
the thin
narrow.
triangular nose, and like there's more teeth prominent on the outside. Apparently, but I'm no croc or alligator expert. I don't think that's actually important. I just
No,
think
it's not important because they don't even
yeah,
list him. It's
correct,
just, it was Kid Loki had a pet. That's
correct.
cool.
Yeah,
But it
that is
also
cool.
had horns, so maybe it is a Loki. I don't know. The point is that was the post-credit scene, but it also shows like I can see why Renslayer is fine being like, yeah, prune him, prune me. I don't give a fuck. Like, well, it'll be fine.
Now, originally when I saw this scene, I honest to God thought, oh my God, we actually experienced Loki's death. And I don't
would have
know
been fine with that.
why.
I would have been fine.
Yeah,
I was like
yeah.
if they want to continue with Sylvie, go ahead.
And that's what I thought was such a great writing device. It's like, no, Loki actually got pruned, and Sylvie's like Loki continuing on, or she is the main character, all that kind of stuff. I'm like, brilliant. But to immediately like, it's almost like this post-credit scene took that away from me. That belief.
Yeah, I wasn't a fan of
how immediate it was, right?
But who like,
because now I'm
expecting for me if this was this is the last time I'll bring it up, I promise. If this wasn't week to week and it was all together, it wouldn't matter as much to me. But
correct,
not letting me live in the moment of like, oh, maybe they really did get rid of him was like, okay, why did we get rid of him in that way then? Like, why not just push him into a portal or something then? If you weren't even going to let people sit with the possibility of him being dead.
Yeah, I criticize it for that. I'm like, I wanted to actually sit with it, and for this just to be the opening cold start for the next episode, because I'm like, you would have made us feel something, and it would have been great and a good use of the week to week format. But this is just like, oh, you took away our concerns about two characters that we have come to enjoy already, and given us a possibility that they're going to return, and then on the side part, my brain has thought up like a billion Owen Wilson jokes of like where he's at in his dimension and all that kind of stuff. And is he with like Wedding Crashers Owen Wilson? And it's like, are they going to have a nod to all those kind of things? That would be hilarious. But like, it's just this post-credit scene takes that away from me immediately, of the idea of like actually thinking that Loki's dead, very much like Endgame before like Infinity War, before the Endgame thing that shows, well, that sets this whole series up, was done, right? It let us live with that, and I didn't like this post-credit scene for that reason.
Yeah, I ultimately it doesn't matter to me. It's so short, but like I was like, I'm not like excited about this because it's like, oh, okay, he's alive, which then I guess a positive is you could be like, well, then that gives the audience a chance to be like, oh, then what happened to Mobius? And maybe that's what they're hoping for more, is the speculation on what happened to Owen Wilson, if we already have confirmation that Loki is still alive. And I hope that means that if they did prune B-15, she could come back as well. But yeah, I think we're on the same page ultimately, that like, oh, why did you not let us live with that? Cheapens
it a little bit. I would have watched the next episode with this opening scene and had a sense of relief and excitement, and it would have been a great way to start the episode. And I just, now it's all online speculation about who these Lokis are, young Avengers speculation. And again, that's like distracting us from talking about the actual show, because this was such a great episode. And like, all I'm thinking about is like, where are they going to go next? What is this dimension, right? There's, you've got it on as your background right now, but there's apparently Avengers Tower in the background. This is post-apocalyptic New York. So what New York is this? Was this the New York that if Loki succeeded, and what Midgard would look like if he did succeed, or whatever, that timeline or something? I don't get it, but is it just the pruning? Is it just the TVA after a whole Nexus event is pruned off the timeline? Do they just like, oh, we'll just put you there because it seems like it's empty and barren, and we can just put you there and torture you for all of existence without purpose or whatever? It's weird. It's a weird thought. And do they put you together with your own variants, or we're all Loki variants, and is all Owen Wilson's characters all variants? And it's just, we don't know now. Now it's all speculation for that, and that's kind of cool about the three Lokis, especially Richard E. Grant. He looks ridiculous. That costume looks ridiculous, and I love it. It's so much fun.
It looks similar to like what they did in WandaVision.
Yeah,
like when they had the Halloween episode.
Ooh, good comparison.
I as I said last time, like when you throw everything into question, I don't know how well you're setting yourself up for a finale, because now I'm like, oh, so then they don't delete people's timelines and they don't just kill them off, because that's what you're led to believe watching the show up until this point.
Yep.
And then you're like, oh, but then what's happening? And then and it's just like, oh, it's fine. I'm sure they have a plan. I just think that with 2 episodes left, you are setting yourself up for people to be unsatisfied, because
I agree.
you built a world and then you took it away. And I get that there are successful shows that are able to do that, but they're not 6-episode miniseries.
Right. This just feels like it's going to be really, really, really rough, because I think the TVA as a whole, as an organization, is one of the best villains that Marvel has done for a while. You know what I mean? And it's just so bloody interesting to me what this Renslayer dynamic is going to lead to. But you're right, it's ultimately not going to lead to any satisfying conclusion here.
Well, I can't say that.
I don't think.
I'm saying chances are.
Fair.
Because I think when people say, oh, that was a good ending, or when people say that wasn't a good ending, they're bumping up against things that feel rushed or unearned.
Right.
And what they've done is they've set themselves up to rush or skip over things to get to whatever their ending is.
I agree.
That is how I feel. And again, I'm not saying the ending will be bad. I'm saying this is what they set up, so hopefully they're able to stick the landing.
Right.
I would rather that than to be right. I would rather be very wrong about them not being able to stick this landing.
No, I agree. At this point, like we're barreling towards the finale of this series, and it's still got a long way to go. What are the questions are, what are the lengths of the next 2 episodes? I mean, it's fair to assume that they would probably make a longer runtime for the next 2 episodes, but how much ground will that actually cover, or will it be like oh well, that wasn't necessary? But it's just, you're right, there's a long way to go right now, and this is going to be an interesting kind of thing. But I am thinking though that I am a little disappointed the whole going back to the original part of the series where he was DB Cooper. That fun bit I thought was going to have more sprinkled elements of historical events through the whole series, and they just kind of dealt with that in the first 2 episodes, and this went to the future after the apocalypse thing right away, and that was I'm a little disappointed by the lack of that.
I stand behind me saying that was a bad move to do the DB Cooper thing in the trailer.
Yeah,
it sets the wrong expectations and didn't even feel that interesting in the episode when it was I like Family Guy. But what I'm saying is, I don't think this show is trying to be Family Guy, and that 100% felt like a Family Guy cut scene.
Correct. It felt like a Family Guy gag. I agree with you on
Loki,
that.
You're a liar. Remember when you were DB Cooper? And it's what the fuck? What are we doing here? And whereas when they go to Pompeii, that feels like, oh, we're learning something, and this is going to reveal something.
Yeah.
That it meant something to the show, the way that DB Cooper meant nothing.
It meant literally nothing to the show. And I'm just
I know that Loki does mischief.
Yeah.
But also the show is trying to say he's not that mischievous. So it also went against what they're talking about.
It's true, because he's not that mischievous because he lost a bet to Thor. Technically, Thor was the one that was mischievous to be like, hey, you go do this. Go freak out the people of Midgar. That. That's mischievous, and he's right. He's just proving the point. It's you don't seem that mischievous in this show. I mean, it's a weird setup, and you're right. It feels like a Family Guy gag, and it feels completely out of place compared to the rest of this. Whereas versus in WandaVision, I'm like, no, every aspect of those episodes morphing into different eras of television that made sense and was built and woven in much, much more successfully than that one gag. That one gag was that is very disappointing to put that in to the promotional material. I get why they did, because it has no relevancy to the rest of the series, but still disappointing.
But it's still, whatever. You can listen to our first episode if you want to hear why I don't like it. But
yep.
Yeah, I stand behind that. I think that was a poor decision to put that in, as if people weren't going to watch a Loki show.
I agree with you.
But yeah, that's the Nexus event. I feel like a lot is done. I hope Sylvie and Loki are reunited in the next episode, but because I was wrong about this, I thought for sure, like, oh, it's just going to be about young Sylvie. So it seems like they are good at juggling things and like mixing things in. So I'll say I hope that it isn't just Loki and the new Lokis. I hope, because I really like their chemistry, and maybe they will save it for the last episode, but I hope they get back together.
Which, by the way, I do want to point out, I do want to bring up the an idea of, like, I do hope that they confirm what her Nexus event was going to be. You know, was it simply, oh, you were on the path for good and we couldn't have that as the timekeepers? Like, I want confirmation for that, because unless, if we don't get that, I'm going to feel like Sylvie's like backstory was rushed, like a lot, very, very quickly too. It was just like, oh, wait, so you literally just snatched up a kid and that was the backstory.
Well, I think she gives the answer that makes sense if you believe what the TVA is, which is
true.
I was born the goddess instead of the god. That's enough to scoop her up. It's just the point at which they pick her up. For me, and I don't think this is me meeting the show more than halfway. It's me leaning in, which you should be doing when you're watching the show.
Yeah.
Is like, not only is it that she's a woman, or female. It's not that just that she's female. It's that she's good-natured.
Correct.
But I think that explanation of like the whole thing is, this is the universe needing to be free and causing chaos through examples like I was born female instead of male.
Right.
I think the show does answer that question in that moment, but there is still more up in the air about what, and I think you'll get an ultimately why is it that they're so interested in Lokis. I think we will get an answer like that. It might not be specific to Sylvie, but I do think this episode gave me enough to be like, this is why it was specifically Sylvie.
Right. Yep, that's fair.
But yeah, that's that.
That's episode 4.
We'll be back next week. But in the meantime, please head on over to thatshelf.com. We are part of the That Shelf Podcast Network. So there's other great shows like Bad Gay Movies, Black Hole Films, Changing Reels, Composers, a whole bunch of great things. So please head on over there. If you'd like to see older episodes of Spoiled Rotten, please go to tdfeverything.com/spoiledrotten. Our Twitter is @tdfspoiled. Our email is spoiledpodcast@gmail.com. So you can get in touch with us that way. If you want to listen to us on the go, we are on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, iHeartRadio, Spotify, Amazon Music, a whole bunch of places. So please go to your place of choice. If you don't find us, let us know. We'll be added there shortly. Rate, review, subscribe, and share with your friends, enemies, family, co-workers, anybody. Please get the word out there.
That's right.
All right. Thank you very much.
Bye.
This has been a TDF Everything production, brah.